Hello all, it's M. Welcome to yet another Eternal Patch Breakdown. Yeah, we had a rather rushed second patch yesterday, so we're going to be discussing all of the changes that occurred as a result of it. These are mostly throne changes once again. This is a much more substantive patch and rather a bit of a surprise one leading into the Throne Open, but at the same time one that I think is pretty sorely needed for Throne meta considerations. This is kind of interesting. We haven't seen two patches in a row quite this fast before. Obviously, it is going to be a bit of an issue for people who are building decks for the Throne Open, but adaptation is an important skill in Eternal, and I'm always interested in seeing people who adapt well to do well in these types of tournaments. So that's going to be really, really fun to see exactly how it goes. Let's go ahead and see what we are looking at, because this is kind of cool. All right, so we have primarily throne changes here. They are a lot of the throne changes that I expected in previous patches, actually. Many of the cards that I've sort of understood to be rather overpowered for a while are really pretty getting nerfed in some pretty interesting ways. We also have a couple of cleanup changes that are affecting certain just weird strategies that maybe, while not being entirely overpowered, are a little bit unusual or against the spirit of the card. So let's talk about it. First things first, discard synergy, getting some nerfs. Felrock the Outcast and Elding of the Final Hour both cost 2 to activate their discard-based ability. So with Felrock, you must pay 2 to play Felrock from the Void, which is pretty relevant because Felrock previously was a free discard for your opponent, as well as a way to get a 5/2 unit on board, which trades pretty well with everything. This card has always been something that provides a lot of value for what it's getting you. It is negating your discard, causing your opponent to lose a card, and also playing itself and trading itself with basically just about anything because it has 5 attack. So it trades one card, goes up one card, and then prevents one card being lost, which, yeah, that's pretty significant and tends to be like really good 3-for-1 card advantage. Paying 2 for this ability is completely within the realm of balance and fairness. Felrog's been around for a while and has always been kind of one of the more pushed discard cards. Now that discard-based synergy is around, I think it's definitely something that would be a little bit more on the level as far as things go. Elding of the Final Hour has also been changed, but in addition to the 2-cost Pale Rider, you also can now pay 3 to play Elding, and it is a 3/3 instead of a 5/3. So a significantly cheaper card, but at the same time you also can't discard it quite as effectively. This is pretty interesting. It allows Elding to be a smaller stealth unit and play in some of the more interesting stealth spaces. I think it is a little interesting that this card no longer plays around with the slug that diverts spells in the same way that you normally would. That changes up its pattern quite a bit, but at the same time this card is now much more likely to actually hit the enemy player and trigger some sort of interesting ability off of stealth-based mechanics. So if you're playing a stealth-based deck, Elding of the Final Hour now has sort of an alternate way to get into those Pale Riders. You still have to sacrifice relics to get there, and paying 2 to sacrifice for a Pale Rider is a really significant nerf. Even if you're not getting the discards for free, paying 2 and killing one of your relics is potentially not going to be a cost you're willing to pay just to get a random Pale Rider, since they are 4/4s, and the cost of 2 plus a relic is maybe a little significant for such a big card. But I do think that this is a probably warranted nerf due to the fact that the Pale Riders obviously provided a lot of immediate onboard value and could fill boards really, really quickly in discard-based synergy decks. This card always seemed like one of the most broken ones to be released. From the first look, it looked like it was going to be one of the stronger cards, and I'm not surprised to see that it's been dominating in Throne and in some of the more ridiculous formats. We also have Diabolic Machinations getting a change. This card is 1 damage to 2 damage per health. I think this is a solid change. The main idea behind this is to increase the amount of pressure that all of the amplify-based strategies and sort of combo-based strategies can take before they no longer are able to access their Amplify and combos. So like if you're up against the Diabolic Machinations Amplify deck and you're attacking into them, you don't necessarily want them to be able to Diabolic Machinations and then immediately search out their combo and win the game every single time, particularly if you've actually done a lot of work to put pressure on them and take their health down. When they can dig 13, 14 cards deep, even after you've done quite a bit of damage to them to prevent that, that is something where you are not being rewarded as a player for pressuring the combo deck, and the combo deck is being too far rewarded for basically just doing all the things that it wants to do without really interacting with you. I think this is a really relevant change. It means that the Diabolic Machinations can search half as many cards, and also that they may want to rely on some lifesteal or life gain to get access to some of the more important cards. So yeah, this is a relevant change ever since, like, I think the first deck that we built when Diabolic Machinations was released was the Amplify combo with Diabolic Machinations. That deck has since been just redesigned and retooled and constantly rebuffed, and it has been an expedition and throne staple for a really, really long time. And I think that this is just always going to be a troublesome combo enabler, so increasing the general risk of the card and making it so that tempo interactions with it actually prevent the combo or make the combo harder to access are really relevant for basically making sure that this card doesn't become too powerful and doesn't become a really non-interactive and unfun deck. I don't think it destroys the combo. I think it is still something where you can access this by drawing enough cards. You might not even play Diabolic Machinations, or you can actually like take further steps to defend your health total and use Machinations to trigger that kind of setup. So yeah, I think this is a pretty relevant change, and it makes for a much better setup. I think it's overall a really, really good change to the combo deck. Lord Styre's Tower, 5 cost instead of 4 cost. Sites are generally released a little pushed, I think, and I'm not a big fan of Lord Styre's Tower in general, so I'm super happy with this change, but I couldn't really put my finger on how good this card is overall. It also plays Rhoda's Agenda for Styre's Adjutant, which, yes, I think it always did that. I just... I'm not particularly... I never really played with Lord Styre's Tower. I just always encountered it and had a few issues with it, just overall with it being generally a little fast on the draw and overpowered in general. It creates the necessary tools to defend itself pretty quickly, and it also has some pretty good effects that permanently affect your opponent's board while also creating a decent amount of tempo and being a free card in Valkyrie-based strategies. This is a nerf that I think is maybe a little bit intense for a site, because like people certainly like to play with these cards and they don't necessarily have completely unfair attack patterns, but overall this is a pretty troublesome card, and sites are usually, again, like a little bit pushed. I think this was a pushed card overall, and so this is an okay change by and large. Eccentric Officer is a 5 cost instead of a 4 cost. I didn't really know this one had happened, but okay. It is an unusual combo, so I don't know if this one was super necessary. I haven't really seen Eccentric Officer decks doing an insane amount, but if there was a broken version of this out, then that's fine. It wasn't a card that, like, generally the power fantasy of this card is getting it out for very, very cheap, and then allowing all of your big stuff to be very, very cheap as well. I think that power fantasy is still accessible, and adding a little bit of risk to it doesn't necessarily make it, or a little bit more to get to that point, doesn't necessarily make it an unfun card or anything like that. If it was too overpowered, then I guess we nerfed that, but yeah, that wasn't one that I've noticed as a strong card in the meta, so that one kind of surprises me. Finally, Clear the Way now produces 6 cost Roadmakers instead of 9 cost Roadmakers. This was due to some exploits with Reweave, so think basically like the Sentinels deck where you play like Bolt of the Praxis, or the Prixis and a bunch of 0-cost relics and 1-cost relics. You clear the way immediately, and then you reweave into a 9-drop to get yourself into like a really, really powerful situation right away. And, you know, the basic idea is that the Roadmakers are already supposed to be trying to get you the big Sentinels, so this is just sort of a cleanup change to make sure that the card is being used somewhat for its intended purpose. I think it's fine. I think overall, like, a Roadmaker doesn't seem like it should be a 9-drop anyways, and tokens should generally generally match what they look like if you want to release them as regular cards later on, as well as if you want to just sort of have them be relatively fair in regards to cost-affecting cards such as Reweave. So this is a reasonable change. I don't think it's particularly like good or bad. It does punish a deck archetype that maybe did exist and was taking some interesting creative leeway with the cards, but it also that felt like an unintended side effect at the same time. By and large, I'm neither here nor there on this one. I think it was a marvelously creative idea to hit the road makers, and potentially something where this is probably worth the change. So, kudos to whoever came up with the Rewave road makers. I hadn't thought of that one, and that one's pretty great. So, but yeah, now if you do that, you're just gonna get a 6-drop. So sorry about that, friends. Overall, like, none of the cards getting nerfed here are cards that are not like actively troublesome, with the exception potentially of Eccentric Officer. But if you're facing off the Eccentric Officer decks in Throne or something like that, it seems reasonable to get that at least out of even-handed Golems areas and allow for some more interesting and ridiculous shenanigans to happen as a result of that. I think this by and large punishes a number of Throne decks that are like really combo heavy and combo dependent, and could open up the way to making Throne a little bit more interesting and interactive. So if you are a Throne fan, this is a good time to play around in the meta, because it's going to be a lot more fun. I think there's probably a lot less decks that are going to kill you for reasons that don't seem particularly fair or interesting, and a lot more decks that are going to be actively interacting you as a result of these changes. As always, I do think that large card pools in Throne are just generally a problem, and it's pretty hard to actually get it to an active Throne balance, but I appreciate Direwolf for making these significant changes and trying to actually balance a format that is getting pretty bloated and crazy. So we'll see exactly how well that works. For the meantime, though, if you want more card updates, you can subscribe to me here at LocoPocho, and if you want to see us on Twitch streaming crazy brews and drafting, we are on Twitch TV/LocoPocho. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. See you next time. Cheers.